Okay, Pmax campaigns and the feature within Pmax campaigns called Final URL Expansion is not as great as what it seems to be, or at the very least, only works in very unique circumstances or situations. I'm going to explain to you on this video what those circumstances are where it would be worth your time, but to put it into perspective right off the clip here, like 10-20% of you guys that are potentially doing or wanting to do Pmax right now, you should be using this final URL expansion for your campaigns. And the main reason for that is that it doesn't give you the control that you would want. So with the good, you get a whole crap load of bad. The bad outweighs the good. So it doesn't have to be that in every situation. So I'll go through where it would not actually apply and would actually, the benefits outweigh the negatives with it, and what markets those are kind of going to be, which markets that in and itself would apply to. So with that said, I'll actually also go into a quick background about this, final URL expansion, how it works, why it works the way that it is, just some basic, stuff that you need to know about it before you go ahead and start using it. And then I'll get into what markets it actually works in specific. So anyway, with that said, many of these, things Google did with Pmax, just to start off to talk about Pmax itself, you can actually do outside of a Pmax campaign. Everybody kind of thinks, since Pmax came out, that Pmax is like some holy grail campaign because Google's marketed it so much. And don't kill me, Google, here, but ultimately, that's the way that it is. There's nothing different about Pmax campaigns that you can't get done with a non-Pmax campaign for the most part outside of shopping ads that you're going to run. And the reason for that is because Google forced us to not have smart shopping anymore, and then you do kind of smart shopping through Pmax. And if you're going to do that, by the way, you do it through a feed-only Pmax campaign to get the best results. So anyway, Pmax has just generally been there to help people, basically spend their money easier. Google, of course, needs to be able to constantly raise their revenues to get the shareholders what they want. More revenue every single quarter. One of the ways that they did that was they took products that they knew people wanted and that worked very well, search ads, shopping ads, and products that can work well, but people don't think they work well because they don't put the effort in or don't have the knowledge to get them to work. Google Display Network, Discovery ads, YouTube ads, bundled them together and then said, hey, look guys, we have a brand new campaign type and it's awesome. It's so awesome, you should be doing this almost exclusively, which is the Pmax campaign. And they could successfully convinced masses of people to use Pmax, which then gets you bought in on these other ad networks that normally by themselves nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole. So it kind of, I know why people, do this. They're just kind of ignorant to the situation, but I still don't understand why people speak so much on Pmax, but don't speak on, display campaigns. Why do they say display campaigns suck ass and Pmax campaigns are great? When reality is, they're both the same thing. And with that, I have not, at least to date, in testing Pmax campaigns for several months now, see anything different at all about Pmax versus standalone search campaigns, shopping, I mentioned shopping, so that one doesn't apply, but standalone search campaigns, display campaigns, YouTube campaigns, discovery campaigns. So in other words, whatever you could get done with Pmax campaigns, you could do with these other standalone campaigns, and you actually could get, you could run a better display campaign than you could run display through Pmax. So in essence, Pmax doesn't do there's no, unique machine learning or AI or whatever involved in Pmax that can get your results running your ads on display and YouTube, since it's all supposed to be all 5 campaign types combined in one. There's no extra power behind it that's going to get display to work that you couldn't get, to work on a display campaign by itself. And with that said, display campaigns, if that's really what you want, you run a regular display campaign because you could set up infinite different filtering options to find that perfect audience that actually is going to work. And with Pmax, It's literally just like a shotgun blast in the air, poof, and just hoping that out of the huge flock of birds that's flying by, you hit one of them. Versus taking a sniper rifle and just, with the scope, with your scope, and then just nailing the bird that you want right in the damn head. That's the difference between running a display campaign and a Pmax campaign, trying to run display ads on Pmax campaigns. So anyway, with Pmax, don't believe all the hype about it. It's not a panacea that's going to get you the results. It seems like that because Google wants you to be able to, legitimately they were trying to help the person that doesn't want to spend more than 15 minutes setting up their ads get results, and they did that. But you're going to have a huge drawback in terms of the results you're going to get because Pmax, their machine learning algorithms aren't good enough to be able to not have a human put together the campaign still. So anyway, with that said, this feature with final URL expansion within Pmax though, you could do, what this feature is actually is basically a dynamic search campaign or dynamic search ads campaign repackaged and put inside Pmax with this final URL expansion. Dynamic search ad campaigns, what those are search campaigns where Google is going to help you basically pick the ad and the landing page to send the traffic to. So it kind of runs it's a search campaign on autopilot. And so anyway, with the final URL expansion within Pmax, it's basically just that. It's going to be able to help you find the right page to send the user to, and it's going to customize the ad for you as well. The only difference being that it takes it to a little bit to the next level with Pmax with the final URL expansion versus what the dynamic search ad campaigns can do. But it's the reason why I mentioned what I did before was to say that there's nothing new about this Pmax campaign. All they did was took what they had, kind of bundled it all together and called it a new thing. When really it's just everything that was there, but a crappier version of it all bundled together. That said, dynamic search campaigns can work in some unique circumstances, but for the most part, the weakness with these dynamic search campaign ads or the equivalent inside Pmax, which is your final URL expansion, is that you're going to get a shitload of junk clicks from people searching for off-the-wall crap. People looking for, if you sell red shoes, for instance, you're going to have people searching for cheap red shoes. And if your red shoes are designer shoes, guess what? You just paid for that person who wants cheap shoes to click on your ad anyway, because the algorithm's not smart enough to realize that you have a non-cheap product. Maybe someday, I'd say 10 years from now, Google's eventually going to figure out how to craft a perfect ad for somebody who wants a specific thing, but we're nowhere even close to that right now. Not even nowhere close to that right now. You got lots of people on Google searching for free shit, free red shoes. And guess what? You have your final URL expansion running within Pmax. You're going to have an ad that pops up, a search ad that pops up, free red shoes here. And you're going to send people to your site that's going to bounce, and you're wasting your money effectively with it, okay? So there's two things here. One, final URL expansion is going to give you unpredictable results in and itself, but on top of that, running, Pmax for non-e-commerce brands to begin with generally is you don't want to do it. So in general, you don't want to use final URL expansion, generally speaking, on non-e-commerce campaigns at the very least. And for non-e-commerce campaigns in general, or non-e-commerce brands in general, you don't want to run Pmax at all because you're going to get a shitload of crappy leads for the reason that I just said. So in short, if you're not doing e-commerce, forget about Pmax. You're going to get a lot of just what I said, people looking for weird off-the-wall stuff. Offer Google crafting a perfect ad for that person searching for that, free product. You're going to have clicks from that, and you're going to get ultimately a bunch of junk traffic. Let alone, you're going to get a bunch of leads, false leads. You'll set up that Pmax campaign. If you have conversion tracking set up, it'll look like you're getting tons of leads through and that's coming through the Google Display Network part of Pmax. And all the leads are going to be bogus. And this fools people because sometimes they'll say, oh, great, I'm getting leads. But they don't check to see the lead quality for 30 days and they end up wasted like $5,000 on ads. Every single lead was junk. And I do mean every single lead, because you can rack up hundreds of crappy leads with Google Display Network doing lead generation if you don't know what you're doing. And through Pmax, it's way too untargeted for most of the time for that to ever work. To the point where I'm just going to tell you straight out, if you're not doing e-commerce, don't do Pmax. You can do other campaigns that have, again, Pmax is just bundling up what's already been there. You can run a search campaign. You can even run a display campaign on its own. And then, but if you were, for some reason, you're bound and determined to run Pmax for non-e-commerce brands or for non-e-commerce company, don't run URL expansion, because it's at least going to pin down the possibilities of how the ad can show up for people, at least a little bit. But anyway, beyond that, just some other things to know about this final URL expansion. Final URL expansion, if you're using a product feed and listing groups, and you activate the final URL expansion, and you've got a product feed hooked up to your campaign, the final URL expansion isn't going to target any other page other than a page that's on your product feed, just so that you know. So ultimately, if you were running Pmax for a non-e-commerce brand and you didn't have a product feed hooked up to the campaign, technically, there's page exclusions where you could say exclude my blog, exclude my About Us page and stuff like that. But like I said, for the most part, that information is irrelevant, because I wouldn't run Pmax to start with for a non-e-commerce brand. And if you are an e-commerce brand where it could potentially work, in some instances, but not every case where you're running an e-commerce brand, would you use final URL expansion. If you did use final URL expansion, all Google's going to be able to do is decide within the product feed and the landing pages that are in your product feed, which product itself should the user be sent to for a individual search. And where that comes in is on the search campaigns and display campaigns and stuff. It'll decide, of the ad that they make for the user, should they send it to this product or this product, but it has to be one of the products on the feed. Okay, so, and with that, Google, through Pmax and the final URL expansion, they're going to customize your ad heavily, and then of course customize what page they're going to send people to. With dynamic search ads, they actually just customize the headline and customize where the user sent. Okay, with the final URL expansion and Pmax, they're going to customize the ad headline and description both, and of course send with your final URL expansion on, customize where the user is getting sent. So with that said, if you're an e-commerce brand, like I said, non-e-commerce, forget about Pmax, forget about final URL expansion for the most part. You're going to get junk leads at the very least, and it's not going to be profitable. And if you guys have a non-e-commerce brand where you're running Pmax and getting good results, I'd like to know, because I haven't talked to a single person who said that they are thus far. But if you're an e-commerce brand running Pmax, like I mentioned before, I would just run what is called a feed-only asset group campaign, where we're just running our feed and no headlines, no ads, no images, because that's going to pin down the amount of times that your ad's going to show outside of shopping, which shopping is the main thing that you want to use for an e-commerce brand. And for the search ads that you also want, I want to run a separate search campaign for that, because it's going to be a lot more tighter in operation and predictable. But if you are an e-commerce brand, sometimes this final URL expansion could be useful, okay? Now, and that would actually be where you would have thousands of products. So if you have thousands of different SKUs in your e-commerce store, with that said, the final URL expansion might be helpful just from the standpoint that, remember I said you do Pmax so you could run good shopping campaigns, better shopping that you can run with standard shopping. But, and then usually you want a search campaign that you will run alongside Pmax to cover the search ads, because the search campaign by itself will do better than what you can do through search on Pmax. So you run an asset group, a feed-only asset group within Pmax, so that you mostly only get shopping within the Pmax campaign, and then you have your search campaign on the side, which picks up search, and that's going to be your best possible combination for an e-commerce brand most of the time. But if you do have thousands or tens or for sure tens of thousands of products. You may not be able to have time effectively to set up a search campaign for all your products, because the main thing with search campaigns and why people screw up those is they kind of expect to set up a few ads for everything, and each product's so different from one another that's not going to cut the mustard. You got to be able to set up custom ads for every product, and within that you should probably set up custom ads for each use case within each product, because if they're looking for a blue coat versus a red coat, you need to have the ad say red coat versus blue coat, even though it's going to send people to that same coat that comes in red and blue and a few other colors. To really, really get decent results that scale on using search ads on Google. So anyway, with that said, it can take tens of thousands of different unique ads to do that right on search ads. And it may not be technically possible for you to do that. And in that case, instead of running a standard a regular search campaign to do search ads on Google via a separate campaign than the Pmax campaign that I was telling you about a little bit earlier, I would then run Pmax, just the Pmax campaign by itself, right? And then I would just run, instead of doing a feed-only asset group, just run a asset group with all the details in there, or, more specifically, if you want, you could run multiple asset groups, but for the most part, I recommend just one asset group, okay? Put all your details in there and then run the Pmax campaign. That'll get you shown, of course, on all the networks, because you're not running feed only anymore. But with that said, what I've noticed actually happens, especially with the final URL expansion, is if you go later on to Google after you run this campaign, and you type in one of your product names into Google, Google, through that Pmax campaign, will have an ad that has the name of the product in the headline, and of course a little bit of a description, but mainly what I see it does is it simply scrapes the product name from your product page and puts it in the headline, and then no other headlines with it, so that if you're looking for let's say a 3/4 inch, bolt, that you're buying from a store that sells nuts and bolts, it'll say 3/4 inch hex bolt. Assuming that's what the product name is. Again, or just to simplify here, if the product is a 3/4 inch hex bolt on your site, it'll actually take that title, or headline if you want to call it that, product title, and put that in the headline by itself in your Pmax search ad, or your search ad that gets shown from your Pmax campaign, so that people are looking for that exact product get directed to that exact product on your site. So, and then ultimately it just tries to, what it's doing with the help of the final URL expansion, it's helping to try to find, of the searches that people make on Google search, what's the closest item that matches what the user is searching for, and then take the product title, put it into the headline to, basically flag the person down and then send them to that item. And so you can go ahead and search for your, different products on your site through and on Google, and you'll notice that Google creates then and basically does that same thing for every item in your entire store. So in that particular case, Pmax running your search campaigns for you and then using the final URL expansion can actually be profitable, because ultimately, if somebody's searching for something that's close to the title of their name of your product, and they put that in the headline of the ad, and they send people to that exact item, that fundamental system is what works, and what you would normally do setting up a good efficient search campaign by itself, that you would set up through not using Pmax to do search campaigns, but a search campaign by itself, what you would do to make that efficient. So it ultimately does a little bit, it does the work for you, if you will. Now again, like I said, if you have just a few items, I'm going to try to make a separate search campaign, because that'll generally be better than just letting Pmax do it all for you, even though it's tempting. However, in some instances, I'll tell you about a case where we had a company that sells industrial lighting. Like if you have a warehouse, the lighting that's in the warehouse, the bulbs go out and you buy replacement bulbs and ballasts and hoods and stuff like that. Or lighting for the outside of your warehouse, or basically lighting for businesses. Company had tens of thousands of SKUs. So even though we set up a separate search campaign to target each individual item, there's so much variability in the amount of searches that people are making, because they're searching for the type of bulb like T5, T6, and then they want, a lot of times the size, or wattage, and then there's these variables in there. And with the dynamic search ads, it actually did much better than our standard shopping campaign, or search campaign did. Google was able to know basically what the person was searching for when they were making a very specific search for a very specific item, and show what they were searching for, putting it into the ad, and then sending them to the right item on the site. And with that, I know that's dynamic search ads, but like I mentioned with Pmax, you're essentially getting, with Pmax with the final URL expansion on, that's essentially what you're getting through it. So if you're like that, you have a store with a lot of items in there, you may actually do better with Pmax with the final URL expansion on than running a search campaign. But that's iffy, because out of all the times that I've looked at hundreds of different Google Ads accounts, probably to date, to be honest, I've probably seen 1,000 different search ads over the last 15 years that I've audited or worked on. We audit a lot that we don't work on and don't take on every client, so I've probably seen for sure over 1,000 accounts by now. I haven't seen any major example where the dynamic search ads did better than the static search ads of what we could build manually than that particular situation, for the most part. So with that said, getting by with running Pmax instead of a search campaign to have your placement on search, or through the search ads on Google Ads or through google.com, sometimes for some of you guys, doing it through Pmax with the final URL expansion turned on is the better way of doing it versus a separate search campaign. And running that separate search campaign with a Pmax campaign that runs a feed-only asset group to cover your, on the shopping side. So there is some unique situations where the final URL expansion could work. And then for everybody else, final URL expansion, I'm turning that off to increase the predictability of how that Pmax campaign works. And ultimately, just try to slow down, so to say, the amount of searches that I'm going to show up for outside of shopping, because in every other circumstance where I don't have all these SKUs and I can't make a search ad for everything, I just want to run on shopping through that Pmax campaign, because that Pmax campaign does shopping better than standard shopping, like I was saying before. And I don't want my ads to run on search and display and discovery and YouTube. So I'll run a feed-only asset group in that Pmax campaign, and I'll turn final URL expansion off, because I want as little chance as possible of my ads popping up outside of shopping, because shopping is what works through Pmax for an e-commerce brand. And these other places, basically either don't work, or they aren't going to work nearly as good as having a separate campaign set up to do those other ads that show up on display or YouTube or whatever, because there's so many other targeting options and levers that you can select with Pmax that you don't get. And it obviously should make sense that if you're going to run a YouTube campaign through Pmax, and all you can do is just upload your ad and upload signals, and compare that on YouTube, where you can target individual videos or people, by putting keywords in there at the very least in that campaign, targeting your competitors' videos, how much better that's going to work than trying to expect to get YouTube to work through Pmax. It's silly. In summary, Pmax is just like, I really got to be careful what I say here on this channel, I think, but my personal opinion is it's just for the person who has more money than time. They don't want to work, they got millions in the bank, they don't give a shit. Let's hook up a Pmax campaign, let it run and burn $50,000, and then eventually the machine learning algorithm will figure out which placements on YouTube might sort of work versus everybody else that's got to get stuff to work right away. And then in that case, you watch my videos on how to create a super targeted YouTube campaign that will be very, very effective right away, and then just run that, and where you're forced to make that work to keep the campaign going, versus it can work. You could let Google's algorithm run it, spend 50 grand before you expect any ROI, and then the algorithm basically eventually figures out how to run that campaign efficiently. So Anyway, that's pretty much everything I can mention about final URL expansion. That's how it works, what it's basically going to do for you, where it's going to be useful. And so 99% of you guys, in summary, aren't going to use final URL expansion, either because you're not e-commerce, because you're not going to be doing Pmax to begin with, or you are e-commerce and you have enough SKUs, or you don't have tens of thousands of SKUs, so you could just run a separate search campaign and do the search ads better than you can do through Pmax, like I was mentioning before. And in some rare circumstances where you have tens of thousands of SKUs and you're in a market where basically like you're selling little bits and bobs and parts and selling bolts or light bulbs, it might actually work better than search campaigns that you can set up to run search ads for your business through Pmax and through having the final URL expansion, and have Pmax try to set you up with your search ads and build them automatically for you on the fly based upon what the user is searching, because that's what it's about. Pmax is about figuring out what they're searching for, showing them an ad that tells them what, regurgitates back to them what they search for, and then sends them to what they think is the most appropriate SKU on your site. So anyway, I know that got into a few other ancillary side things, but you kind of have to know the full scope of how Pmax works to understand whether or not you're going to do final URL expansion or not. And I don't want to be telling you guys to use it or not use it when there's certain businesses that shouldn't be using Pmax at all, like I said, i.e. non-e-commerce businesses. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked this video though and you thought it was helpful, I'd appreciate it if you would give it a like, and also consider subscribing, as we have a lot of other videos on this channel about other money-making PPC strategies where I reveal on this channel the stuff that works and that we're testing at our PPC agency. We give it to you on this channel, as well as the stuff that doesn't work. As far as what you're going to find on YouTube, as far as other PPC advice, this is the best information that's going to give you the how-to, hands-on, actionable advice you need to make money with ads, given it's coming from somebody who manages about 3-4 dozen active PPC campaigns on Google, Facebook, and so forth at any given point. So this isn't coming from somebody who's just speculating or runs a company but doesn't do the work. I'm actively hands-on in the work at our PPC firm, even though we have other employees that help out, of course, execute my strategies, but I got my hands in the work all the time. And so what you're getting is real information about what's working today, how to make money with PPC. So you should subscribe. I also have a blog at guaranteeppc.com/blog where you can get extra advice from me on how to set up PPC campaigns that are effective and are profitable. And so if you're looking for a little bit more detailed advice on how to set up PPC campaigns that are basically guaranteed to work every time, you could head there and get some extra supplementary information from me there as well. As a last little thing on this video, and before I get there, I should say, if you have any questions about anything I covered today, leave me a comment below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a comment on this channel, usually within a couple days' time. So, but as a last mention here on this video, I want to mention that I have a brand new PPC program where we're offering turnkey PPC campaigns here at our agency. So if you're not looking for a PPC agency, a traditional PPC agency that kind of manages your campaigns, as I mentioned on this video, I've worked on hundreds of campaigns basically. And if we got the best way or easiest way to get results with PPC, if you don't mind what you're working on, is to simply go to a company like ours, which I'm the only one offering this, or we're the only one offering this that I know of, and simply ask, what results have you gotten what markets have you gotten results in, and can I use those same results for a campaign in my market? So for instance, you want to start up a plumbing company in San Francisco, you could use our plumbing campaign that we're using to rake in millions of dollars in Miami. That's basically the same campaign you would run in San Francisco. We'll give you the campaigns, the templates, the ads, the landing pages, all of it. And you can know what you're going to get ahead of time in terms of results, cost per lead, number of leads, all that stuff. And B, from there, everything that you can just copy and paste it into your account and get those similar results for yourself. We might also, of course, have a campaign template that we've already built up for you over years for your exact market. But we built this mainly for people who were reaching out to us, and it just made more sense for that company to say, hey, you're doing this, if you wanted to start up a campaign in a similar market where, this person's already making $5 million a year, we'll give you their template, you use it, you're going to get guaranteed results. And then selling the template, and they were off to the races. So anyway, if you're interested in that type of thing, reach out to us. I'll let you know what campaigns we have results in, and what the results, of course, you can get in those different markets. And it all works out in that, as long as you're in a different market than our client, or past client, to where you guys there's no conflict of interest, you could use the same results they're getting in a different market. We also have service campaigns like that, and product campaigns where somebody's selling a product in one country, you could be using it to sell the same exact thing with similar margins in a different country, and your country as well. So anyway, I'll wrap it up with that. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hope to see you in my next video where we have another great strategy for you there. Peace out.